Hi, welcome back to the Discipler Group. I'm John Scholl, the Bishop for the Baltimore-Washington Conference. We've been sharing together in our series on leadership, and particularly about adaptive leadership and how leadership needs to continue to adapt to the issues and concerns that it finds itself leading in. Today, we have three pastors that'll be sharing with us. Three pastors from our Western region that'll talk about how they've led through adaptive challenges. The first is Andrew Cooney. He's the pastor at Berkeley Springs Church in West Virginia. And he's been creating a completely new approach to children's ministry, including staffing, beginning of children's church, change in Sunday school format, and redesigning the children's area. The second pastor we'll hear from is Rudy Broplay, pastor at Asbury in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Rudy has been working with his congregation over several years to begin to help them think about not only how do we nurture the congregation, but how do we have a mission-minded outreach into the community to involve many more people in the outreach ministry. His ministry has involved transforming attitudes and actions to becoming a partner in the community. And then thirdly, we'll hear from Katie Bishop, the pastor at New Hope in Brunswick. Katie has been working with this congregation. It came together through a merger and is now looking at building a new building. As we all know, when we come together in new configurations and look at how do we build structures and ministry places for new life, that it's always a challenge. After 3 years of a building campaign that has resulted in a nice parking lot, but no building, the congregation has been overwhelmed by the word building. Every time people would hear the word, they would fear that we were asking them for money. And so Katie's worked with the congregation and now getting them on track about how to be engaged in ministry in meaningful ways. So we're going to have a blessed time today hearing from three of our very strong and fine pastors, all from the Western region that are doing great ministry and leading through adaptive challenges. Thank you for coming today. We look forward to working with you as you continue to lead your congregations to make disciples of Jesus Christ and transform the world.
Good morning. As part of our ongoing discussion about leading our congregations through adaptive challenges, we are pleased to have with us three clergy persons serving in the Western region that have done just that. Rudy Broplay serves at Asbury in Shepherdstown, Katie Bishop at New Hope in Brunswick, and Andrew Cooney at First in Berkeley Springs. With Andrew is Brady Smith, a high school senior and intern and leader in the church. Andrew, your congregation has placed value on children's ministries, which demanded a new, multifaceted approach to doing children's ministry. Talk us through that transformation.
Thanks, David. The adaptive change that I want to talk about today involves children's ministry. This is me with my ministry staff standing outside of First UMC. It was founded in 1869. Our church is located in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. Now, when some of you hear West Virginia, here's what you think of. But that's not true. There are country people in this church, but we're a modern-day church with a contemporary praise band, a projection system, and today we have a decent-sized staff. One of the challenges we faced early in my time here was our children's ministry. Maybe you can relate to that. If you look at our church from the outside, what do you think the children's area would look like? Block hallways with tile or commercial carpeting? Classrooms with a few posters, small tables, and chairs for the little ones? That's close to what we had. It reminded me of this. This is our local elementary school. It's a great school with great people, but honestly, kids aren't breaking down the doors to get in there. All day long, they sit at desks or tables with chairs, learning and working while a teacher stands up in front teaching them. It reminded me a lot of how we did Sunday school. School on Sunday. How appealing is that? And it showed. We had a few children, but not many. But what's the alternative? Well, we had some clues right in front of us. Vacation Bible School was one. We had great music, a large group teaching time, we kept the kids moving, there were games, and they learned, and it was very popular. So a group of us began to revision what children's ministry might look like. We prayed hard, and then we began to dream. What if Sunday school looked more like VBS? What if we had great music with everybody singing together? What if instead of a teacher standing up front, we had a large group teaching time with skits and storytelling? And then we followed it up with crafts, activities, and a small group time that helped kids apply all this and feel like they were a part. And what if we transformed the space so that when kids saw it, they wanted to be there? In fact, what if our children's ministry began to reach out more into the community like Vacation Bible School does? Well, this is the power of vision. And if you're going to lead transformational change, you better start with a clear vision. That's what gets people on board. All this was going to take a lot of change, a lot of energy, and some money. And we knew that there were going to be roadblocks. So we sat down and identified them. This was going to cost some money. Just a year before, we'd hired a full-time youth person with a full-time salary. It was our first full-time staff hire, and now we were talking about a second staff person. We knew that some people were going to say that it was too much money or it was too soon. Second, we knew that some of the adults were going to ask, what about us? All that focus on programming for young people. Third, we were talking about making dramatic changes to the physical look of our church, and that was going to affect a lot of people. And fourth, we knew we had to revamp the way we were doing our programming, which affected a lot of volunteers. So we formed a plan to lead people through this change. First, we decided that if we were going to get the support of some of our senior adults, we needed to start a ministry for them. So we began a group in the church called 55 Plus to meet the needs of people in our church and in our community. Today, over 80 people attend this group, making it a real win-win. Second, we knew that we needed to hire a full-time staff person to accomplish all this children's work. So we began drafting a clear job description so that others could see that volunteers could not handle the changes we were planning. Third, we began to get people on board. We wanted key influencers in the church and in children's ministry to get together and to talk about what the future might look like. We began to ask how we wanted children's ministry to look different and how we wanted to reach out to the community more. These were not necessarily people who held positions in the church, but people who others looked up to as decisions were made. Their support helped move us forward as other people saw key leaders giving their support. Finally, we hired a staff person in 2004, and our children's ministry went through big changes. There was still opposition, but we found that when we took the time to go back and communicate why we were doing this differently and how, people got on board. Today we have 3 worship services, and in the first service alone, we have up to 25 kids between the ages of 3 and 10, and as many as 15 in our nursery. After we transformed our programs that focused on kids in our church, we turned our attention more outwardly. We started an after-school program called Go Friends. It was not designed to do homework with the kids, but to love them, instill values in them, and teach them practical things in life. So we have a large group worship time in teams. We have a snack time. Then the kids go to different kinds of stations. That may include sewing, knitting, Legos, crafts, drama, construction, making jewelry, karate, or any other number of things. We meet once a week after school, and the buses drop off the kids at the church. We started 3 years ago and had 75 kids registered. This year we have over 130 kids that attend Go Friends from K through 5th grade. Many of our volunteers that help are high school kids, and several families have joined our church as a result of this program. Today I brought with me Brady Smith. He's a senior at the high school, and he's interning with me at the church as he discerns a call for ministry. He lived through these changes.
As a 9-year-old kid, our children's ministry wasn't very fun. And then I wanted my kid friends to come, but there wasn't anything that was attracting them there. As the transformation was made, I didn't even have to ask, and they started coming. And now, as an 18-year-old volunteer with our children's ministry, I can see the impact that it's having on the kids, and it's an awesome thing. Because of it, I really am hoping to continue my life in the ministry.
When you lead adaptive change, it can be very hard, but the payoff can be big as well.
Rudy, your congregation has been shifting from an orientation of nurture to an orientation of mission. Tell us about that adaptive change and your partnerships in the community.
After serving at Asbury for a bit, it became clear that although we had potential and promise, our church was primarily a nurturing center, kind of like an American Express Club, with privileges for members only. An adaptive challenge for us was moving from this primarily nurturing center church to a predominantly outreach-oriented, mission-minded church. And so we call a vision casting, vision enabling meeting to talk about this adaptive challenge and the change that was needed. Well, 2 minutes into my intro, I was interrupted with a question. One person asked, will this change involve worship? My response, yes. Worship being our main event, it most likely will. And then the second person, well, Pastor, we're a music church. I just want you to know that. Before I could respond, member number 3 jumped in. Whatever you do, we are not changing the way we worship. Those who don't like it, there's a Catholic church down the street. They can go there. Ouch. Catholics shouldn't watch this video. And so we encounter passionate opposition, and I believe that every major movement involves 3 kinds of people: visionaries, enablers, and sustainers. So though there was opposition to the change we were seeking, we noticed a passion. And passionate people can make good enablers and sustainers. So instead of trying to decimate the passion, we chose to cultivate the passion and then redirect that passion to help bring about the change that we sought. So we stepped back and we engaged in a campaign of adaptive change. And we discovered 3 things in the process. The first thing we discovered is that we had to change the conversation. We talked about the change that was necessary. We talked about what we needed to do, why we needed to do it, how, and who would be involved. I talked to everybody who would listen, beginning with the leaders. Those who were passionately opposed to it, we talked to them too. We changed the sermons to reflect some new messages. Bible studies were accented. Life groups, the message was the same. I visited every small group to just talk about where we needed to go and the new mindset that was necessary. And in all of the conversation, we were very careful to share the benefits of the change. People always need to know, how would their lives be better if you do what you do? The second thing we discovered in the process is that the change conversation led to change conduct. Now, our ministry planning didn't begin with the focus on the program. Now we focus on people. We stopped glorifying our committees and we started going into our communities. Now our main focus had changed from maintaining to moving, and our attitude had affected our actions, and we discovered that was good. And so now that the conversation had changed and people's conduct was changing, the next thing we discovered in the process is that when conduct changed, then the culture changed. Our goal all along the adaptive challenge was to change the culture of our church, but it began with a conversation. When the church talks different and acts different, it becomes different in a decent and a dynamic way. Much of the growth we're seeing at Asbury is due in part to the fact that we made this shift from a nurturing center church to an outreach-oriented, a more mission-minded church. The partnerships we have in our community, the after-school program, the parent classes we teach, all of those is a result of a church that started to think differently. And I think a church becomes more appealing when it constantly thinks about others, when it talks about others, and when it reaches out to others. And when new folks join, there's a boldness when they join the church, because you'll quickly detect that they will figure out what it is you're doing, identify what's important to you, and then they go and do likewise. Thus, we create that multiply effect, and it produces more disciples who are intentional and missional. In ministry, few things can be more frustrating than a great vision not coming to fruition. But the culture is critical. The culture is crucial, and it creates the environment for vision to becoming able and sustained. Changing a church culture takes time. It takes work, takes persistence and patience. But all of that is necessary in order for the leader to lead. If the hard work of Monday through Saturday is never done, Sunday may never happen. Finally, in leading this adaptive change, I too was changed. And I learned some valuable lessons. First thing I learned is that we have to obey the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. Focusing on the Great Commandment, loving God and others, while neglecting the Great Commission, causes the church to stagnate at best and deteriorate at worst. The Great Commission and the Great Commandment goes together to make for a healthy ministry and a balanced church. The second thing I learned is that God expects me to adapt to his will and his way. If adapt means to make suitable what is people, place, or thing for a new use or a new purpose, then God has expectations of adaptation of myself and all of us who seek to lead God's people. The good news is God works with whoever is available. The final thing that I learned is that God is pretty good at transforming adaptive challenge into adaptive change. God dealt with Jeremiah in an adaptive manner, changing Jeremiah's question mark into an exclamation mark. From the question, is there no balm in Gilead, to an exclamation, there is a balm in Gilead. God dealt with Ezekiel in an adaptive manner also, changing Ezekiel from a mortician in the cemetery to a minister in the sanctuary. In God's adaptive process, Ezekiel went from parading in a place of death to presiding in a place of life. God deals with us in an adaptive way, taking ordinary Joes and Janes with all of our faults and failures. And God can speak a message into our messed up minds. And next thing you know, that which was messed up becomes dressed up, giving us the confidence we need to step up and to go out and to do the mission and ministry of the church that God has called us to serve. If we allow God, God can do adaptive work. Even those of us who are stubborn and stiff-necked, God can still work in, through, and with us. God can use adaptation such that nobody becomes somebody, and ordinary members can start to do extraordinary ministry. When faced with adaptive challenge, don't see it as an obstacle. See it as an opportunity and approach it as such. And then God, with his help, will do that 2 Corinthians 5:17 thing. Old things will become new, and change for the better will be on the horizon for the church and the community.
Katie, I understand that your congregation has been heavily involved in a building project, a much-needed project, but one that has perhaps distracted you from a missional focus. Tell us about what has happened and how you regained your focus.
The greatest adaptive challenge our congregation has faced in the last year and a half has been a change in our understanding of church. New Hope is a unique congregation, two churches that merged together about 5 years ago, settled in a center of growing community. Part of the merger was an understanding that both current church buildings would be sold and a new church building would be constructed to better meet the needs of this new community. For the last 5 years, New Hope has been working towards this new church building. However, with the downturn in the economy and internal church conflict, all New Hope has 5 years later is a nice parking lot. With such a struggle to build a new church building, it got to the point where the whole focus of the church was this new building. Weekday ministries had ended, and the only functioning committees were those that had to do with the new building. Outreach was non-existent, and every time the congregation heard the word building, they would cringe because it evoked images of asking for money, of conflict, and an uncertain future. The problem is, a church is not a building. The church is the people. And helping the congregation reclaim this understanding has been a difficult process. It has happened in worship with preaching and teaching about the church being the body of Christ, witnessing Christ's love to the world. It has happened through revitalization of ministry. From opportunities to serve, to study, the church has once again been busy witnessing the love of Christ to each other and to the world. It has happened with a new vision statement. Instead of using the word building, we are now a congregation committed to helping people connect to God and to community. While some of this happens inside the church location, the vision statement is bigger than the place we gather. Our slogan used to be Building Hope for Tomorrow, but now our new slogan is Hope Worth Sharing, again pointing to our call as a church to share the good news. The biggest evidence of meeting this adaptive challenge has been a change in the phasing of our building program. Initially, we were planning on building a large sanctuary, nice office suite, coffee bar, and 2 classrooms. While this $2 million building would be beautiful, it was a space all about us, what we wanted and what we thought we needed. It embodied the struggle with what it meant to be church. Now we are building a multi-purpose mission center. It is a space where we can live into God's vision for us, connecting people to God and to community. From the exercise classes that will use it on Tuesday nights, to the senior fellowship group on Wednesday mornings, to the preschool play group and the youth basketball team, it is a space intended to help us as we live into the hope of Christ, a hope worth sharing. While we still have a long way to go, New Hope has made great progress in meeting this adaptive challenge. With a new capital campaign on the horizon, we know that focusing on the purpose of the space rather than on the brick and mortar itself helps us remember that the church is not a building. The church is God's people.
These are just 3 examples of leading through adaptive challenges. Thank you all for telling us your stories. We hope that you will all share your stories in your groups. Don't just tell the what, tell the how, so that we can help each other lead through adaptive change.